the original Star Trek like you've never seen it before. Digitally remastered, completely uncut. Interviews with the cast and crew. Star Trek, the Sci-Fi Channel Special Edition, coming up next.
The Man Trap was the very first Star Trek episode to air on NBC. The date was September 8th, 1966, or stardate 1513.1 or something like that. None of us could guess what a phenomenon we were creating, especially if you consider how bad the reviews were. One publication said the show solicits all-out suspension of disbelief, but it won't work. They said it was a dreary mess of confusion. They didn't like the writing, the direction, the stars, or the production. They call Spock's hair bizarre and a dilly. Well, like so many critics, they're gone, and we're still here. Over the years, this episode has come to be known by fans as the Salt Vampire, and some believe it's one of the scariest episodes of Star Trek. A gruesome monster attacking humans, screams, corpses with little rings all over their faces. Definitely the stuff nightmares are made of. Enjoy.
Don't just watch. Beam aboard the Dominion at sci-fi.com right now. Enter the Trek chat room and experience Star Trek the interactive way. Star Trek, the Sci-Fi Channel Special Edition will continue after these messages.
One of the interesting things about science fiction in the 60s, and certainly in the mid-60s when Star Trek came along, is that it was not taken seriously at all. Sci-fi was for kids, and the best representation of that was probably Lost in Space, which came along a year before Star Trek did. But most of science fiction, and certainly in the movies too, had a bit of a schlocky element to it.
Why don't you go chase an asteroid?
Hey, Janice, is that for me?
Don't you wish it was?
Which the network did not want. NBC did not want this television show at all. I mean, they basically were drug kicking and screaming into this project. And Roddenberry originally envisioned something a lot more epic and a lot more sprawling with this show. I mean, he imagined, let's go to a planet every week and do a big, huge epic thing. And he had to downsize, and in the very downsizing, I think, came some of his very best ideas. So, Gene Roddenberry comes along totally intending to do Wagon Train in Space. I mean, he made, no bones about it. This is exactly what this premise was. But envisioned a much headier concept of science fiction, and a science fiction that was also about heart, and that's the great thing that I think Star Trek speaks to.
Leonard.
Nancy.
Hello.
It's good to see you.
Let me look at you.
There is a warmth, there is a connection, there is a family. It's, they may be on a spaceship the size of, the Houston Astrodome, but there's a feel of the all-American living room.
Why don't you tell me I'm an attractive young lady, or ask me if I've ever been in love? Tell me how your planet Vulcan looks on a lazy evening when the moon is full.
Vulcan has no moon, Miss Uhura.
I'm not surprised, Mr. Spock.
Star Trek, the Sci-Fi Channel Special Edition will return in a moment.
Since the creature was addicted to salt, it was necessary to decorate the sets with what was supposed to be futuristic salt shakers. Some were so futuristic, it was felt the audience wouldn't understand what they were. So it was decided that with some modifications, they would become McCoy's medical instruments. And speaking of McCoy, this was one of the very few episodes that gives any clue to aspects of his life before he joined the Enterprise.
Matt Jeffries was our art director. My wife and I have just finished a book called the Star Trek Sketchbook, in which we deal with the four main artists of Star Trek, and Matt, of course, is the main one. You talk to anyone, they will tell you, without Matt Jeffries, there's no Star Trek. What happened was Gene Roddenberry spoke to Matt and said, I want jets without jets. I don't want jet noises, I don't want contrails, I want a different method of propulsion. He left. So Matt sat there and had to devise the whole thing. And it was truly trial and error.
Something odd, Captain.
General Quarters 3, intruder alert. GQ 3, intruder alert.
What do you think of this? The struts are here, the pontoons are there, it's round, it's square, it's oblong, whatever. And we'd say, well, maybe we lose that. What do you think? Maybe we add that to it. It really got down to the point where we would have done that forever, right? Because we didn't know what we were talking about. We really did not. We're guessing.
Guys from JPL came over once. Gene had a model of it, and they said, Gene, we figured it out the best we could aerodynamically, and if it were really to get up in the air and fly, it would go ass over tea kettle.
Miss Uhura, your last subspace log contained an error in the frequencies column.
Mr. Spock, sometimes I think if I hear that word frequency once more, I'll cry.
And finally, Matt decided that in his mind, this design worked. And that was the design that Matt painted and made nice and everything else and brought in, and it looked great, and we all said, go with it. And bottom line, the entire look of the Enterprise, the structure of the Enterprise, designed by Matt Jeffries.
Looking back at it now, one thing seems strange about this episode. James Kirk displays an amazing intolerance toward another life form. He even calls the relationship unnatural, definitely an attitude he would leave behind as he faced creatures just as deadly in The Devil in the Dark and Metamorphosis. So, forgive Jim and his prejudice. It was an early episode. Characters, their personalities, and their beliefs were still being formed, and eventually Captain Kirk would come to respect all life forms, no matter how alien, and especially how feminine.
Tomorrow on Star Trek, the Sci-Fi Channel Special Edition.
Captain's log, stardate 1533.7. We have taken aboard an unusual passenger, the sole survivor of a transport crash 14 years ago.
Are you a girl?
Oh, Charlie's our new darling, our darling, our darling. Charlie's our new darling. We know not what he'll do.
She could love me.
She's not the girl, Charlie.
But if I did what you said, if I was gentle.
Charlie, there are a million things in this universe you can have, and there are a million things you can't have. That's the way things are.
Look, I'm off duty at 1400. Why don't you join me in Recreation Room 6, Deck 3?
You got a deal, friend.
You responsible for what happened to the Antares?
Why?
Answer me.
Well, they weren't nice to me.
What about us, Charlie?
Then on Thursday,
Captain's log, stardate 1312.4. The next mission of the Enterprise takes us into an unknown force field which affects the destiny of my closest friend.
I understand you least of all. Gary told me that you've been friends since he joined the service, that you asked for him aboard your first command.
It is my duty, whether pleasant or unpleasant, to listen to the reports, observations, even speculations on any subject that might affect the safety of this vessel.
It's like a man who has been blind all of his life, suddenly being given sight. Sometimes I feel there's nothing I couldn't do in time. Some people think that makes me a monster, don't they, Jip?
What would you do in my place?
Kill me?
I'm William Shatner, and you're watching Star Trek on the Sci-Fi Channel.
First, the Sci-Fi Channel brought you Star Trek as you'd never seen it before. Now we're going to do it again.
I'm going to what?
See all 80 episodes through a Vulcan's eyes.
I am Spock.
Join the man who was there shot one, day one. Leonard Nimoy hosts Star Trek, the Sci-Fi Channel Special Edition.
If you think you know Star Trek,
I know he didn't like his ears.
think again.
Star Trek, the Sci-Fi Channel Special Edition. Begins Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern.
Imagine a creature that feeds off of human life, attacking and draining the body of what it needs to survive, transforming itself at will into any form. Sounds like a certain sharp-toothed resident of Transylvania, doesn't it? But in this case, I'm talking about one of the most frightening creatures to ever appear in any episode of Star Trek, an episode entitled The Man Trap. This was the 6th episode we produced, but it's the episode NBC chose for Star Trek's debut, perhaps because the story dealt with more standard, recognizable sci-fi material. Scary stuff, monster stuff. Definitely not the intelligent, thought-provoking material that Star Trek would become known for. In fact, this episode represented what NBC wanted out of Star Trek, a Monster of the Week series. Now, that's not to say that this story is without merit. There's nothing wrong with a good scare now and then. And in that area, The Man Trap certainly delivers. One of the interesting things about this episode is that we get to learn a little bit about Dr. Leonard H. McCoy. Throughout the rest of the series, we would meet many of Jim Kirk's past loves. We'd hear about his academy days and about his early career. Spock's past would be examined in detail in episodes like Amok Time and Journey to Babel. But McCoy's story was never really told. In fact, it took nearly 30 years for McCoy to finally get his middle initial, H, in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. The Man Trap was the first Star Trek episode directed by the talented Mark Daniels. In a way, Mark was actually responsible for me being in Star Trek, since he was the person who cast me in a role in Gene Roddenberry's previous series, The Lieutenant. Mark would go on to direct some of the best episodes of Star Trek, including The Naked Time, Space Seed, and Mirror, Mirror.